You're watching Faith and Reason, a talk show about God, politics, and pop culture. From the perspective of three pastors who are not afraid to tackle and ask the hard questions. Faith and Reason, a Christian talk show for those on a spiritual journey.
Good evening. Welcome to Faith and Reason, a show that looks at issues that are going on today's society in light of the Word of God. I'm Pastor George Crespo from First Baptist Church in Cliffside Park. With me is Pastor Rick Spence from Fort Lee Gospel, yes. And we welcome you today. Soon we'll be heading into Easter, very early Easter, and so we went and saw a movie called Risen, which deals with the resurrection. It's done pretty good in the box office, third best gross on opening weekend, and has made more than $25 million so far. So we want to look at this movie and see it as a movie and also as how it relates to the story of Jesus, how historical and non-historical it is. Pastor Rick, maybe at first just give us a basic overview of what the story is all about.
Yeah, the basic story is that they have a high-ranking official to Pontius Pilate, a prefect, they call him, who is Clavius, is his name, and Clavius is sort of an up-and-coming Roman leader, and he's been involved in a lot of battles with insurrections, things like that, and then his assignment is to finally oversee the death of Jesus because of complication, and as Jesus is in the tomb, make sure that the tomb is taken care of, but the other guards go to the tomb, and then to recover the body. That's his mission from Pontius Pilate. And so it's an extra biblical story, fiction in that sense, but it builds around the idea of looking for it. And along the way, he finds the disciples, and it unfolds from there. That's the main thing.
So far as a movie itself, how would you critique it? Was it a good movie? Was it well developed? That had good plot, characters, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, it's you can see why it's doing well. I mean, it's a well done movie. The actor, as the lead, does a great job of acting. The quality of acting is excellent. They've got some named people involved in the production of it, and so the story is well done. It's I guess sometimes I watch too much with my critical biblical thinking going on, and that sort of takes a little bit away from it, but generally speaking, it's a good story.
Yeah, I also enjoyed it as well. I'm always I always do the movie part for as a movie. I thought it was very well done. I never got the feeling of, oh, I'm watching a movie, or this is really horrible acting. I was actually impressed that not only the lead role, but even the ones not only played by Jesus and the prefect, but a number of others are so well done. They work in harmony so well that it's believable. I never saw dialogue that seemed choppy or out of place. So as a movie, I personally enjoyed it. I could watch that movie again and say, even though I know there's a almost like it's what do you call it? One of those fiction and history put together.
Historical fiction.
It's historical fiction type story. It was still pleasantly surprising. I normally go. I remember when I went to see. I told you when I went to see Left Behind with you. I was like, oh, why didn't I let Rick come alone? I could have stayed home. I could have pretended I was sick. I was like, why didn't I stay behind instead of watching? Because it was so bad. It was so horribly done. But this movie, it's good when you see good quality films being done on Christian themes, or at least themes related to Christianity. Now the film, we saw it. It looked like it has some sort of Italian and Spaniard type references because there was a lot of Spanish actors and Italian actors, and even the location was Spain and Malta.
Malta, right.
So it was pretty, again, very impressive for this type of film.
Yeah, definitely. I think, back to the Passion of the Christ 10 years ago or whatever it was, Hollywood woke up to the fact there's a huge market slice if you can make something that Christians will watch. Yeah. And they've tapped into it, and sometimes they've done a poor job of it because they haven't done good quality. But here the quality's decent.
Yeah, I like what it's called Walden Films. Has come out with they the ones who did the whole Chronicle of Narnia's film, and they've also done other films for not necessarily Christian, but they're wonderful stories for children, for things
Right.
like, and they've done very well with that. And again, when you see that booming, you're right. Hollywood has awakened to the fact there's something here. Do you want to neglect it, or do you want to tap into it? And
Right.
when you tap into it, it means you're going to have better actors, bigger budget,
Yes.
and like productions like this one, which I thought, even though afterwards when I recommended it on Sunday, one of my deacons came to me afterwards and said, you know, it's not historically correct. I was like,
Yeah.
well, if I was going to get historically correct, I'd be like, you know. But that's why I stayed afterwards. Remember, we were looking at the credits. I was going to see if they had consulted anyone. I didn't see any consultation so far as New Testament scholars or anything like that. But
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, in one sense, it was there's a director and a writer, and they seem to be pretty heavy-handed with the story. And of course, being a fictional story, it was fine. I just think that, and we'll get into that's part of this program is sort of picking apart some of the details that could have been done better. But as a movie, it was worth watching. And
all
I
right,
can
so
recommend it.
let's look at some of the characters that appeared and how well they were done. Obviously, the role of Jesus. What did you think of the actor? And
I mean, first of all, he wasn't blonde-haired, blue-eyed. Thank God.
Thank God.
That's one of my issues. Is I said, you know, how do you take a Middle Eastern man and make him look like he came from Sweden? You know, that's. But that said, no, he you know, being, I guess he's Spaniard, right? You know who the actor is, and so he had an appearance that was reasonable. Yeah, I guess generally it wasn't terrible. He was like really smiley and happy kind of guy. Maybe not as verbal as I might have wanted. He didn't have as much authority, but it's really difficult in film to capture the authority of Jesus. And now you're dealing with a resurrected Jesus on top of it. So I think it came a little short on that, but that's really difficult to capture as well. You know.
I think they caught him well because they were not trying to capture him as the main character.
Right.
He almost seemed like a side character, and really only played the part of how he interacted with this Roman soldier. But in that sense, I think they did pretty well. But you're right. I think he was too limited. If he had been the star of the show, again, he is a great actor. I love the stuff he does.
Okay.
So I've never watched anything by him and said, oh wow, this guy is horrible. This guy's a great actor, wonderful, and I'm glad keeps getting more and more roles. But yeah, I think here there was a limitation to. And I think also part of the problem, you know, we haven't got to the critique part, was that they'd had that kind of flares, 1960s hippie type flair to it.
We can throw some of those things in. Yeah, no, absolutely. And he had, he was like the leader of the band, but the whole, especially the younger disciples, they look like they smoked pot first. And
we don't want to offend. We love.
You know,
no one's an enemy here.
Right, that kind of thing. And I think that's where they're missing the passion of the first century. You know, the Jewish zealousness was missing in that sense.
They try to capture a little bit, but yeah, you're right. They had him more like a mushy, sweet 1960s hippies.
Yeah,
I'm sure older generations looking at it go, yeah, that's the Jesus I remember. All right, Pontius Pilate.
You know, he was given a role that was, you know, I thought that, you know, he was, first of all, well acted. You know, it's somebody Firth or something. You know, he's a name actor that did the role, and I think he did his part well. But I think the way they presented him is he was a little bit wishy-washy. I mean, you get a sense. I mean, there's two things. I did some reading on him after watching the movie, and as a refresher. And on the one hand, the Bible presents him as sympathetic to Jesus, almost like he's drawn into the personality of Jesus. He wants to save him from crucifixion, but the crowd and he's just sort of you know, pulled into the execution of Jesus, the crucifixion. But history tells us about a ruthless man, a man who actually got in trouble with Rome and lost his his role because he slaughtered a whole bunch of Samaritans, you know, almost unwarranted. So you know, you've got that picture in history, and then you've got the picture. And now he's made out to be a little bit too much of an American politician, if I can say that, you know, and he's just working the angles. I mean, he is a politician. Don't get me wrong. And
but he's the first century, not 21st century.
Yeah, right. And that's the difference. He was not ruthless in the way he was portrayed.
Now, there was a guy named Frank Morrison who wrote a book on the resurrection. I think he captured well that kind of contrast that we see between the Bible and history. He shows that Pontius Pilate was a ruthless man. But the reason that he's different in the Gospels, he points out very clearly, is because Pontius Pilate was also a very superstitious man. And in the story of the Gospel, we know that his wife warns him, "I've had a dream about this man, have nothing to do with him." If that element was not there, the story of the Gospels really would make no sense, because this guy did not care. He would just leave this guy and say he's a Jew. Yeah. He's just another. He's a dog. Kill him. He had no regard. It's almost like for him, you know, like the Jews feel unclean about dealing with Gentiles. Pontius Pilate felt unclean of having to be ruling in this place. He'd rather be in Rome.
Yes.
And actually, after the story happens, historically when he has Jesus killed, he does become more buddy with Caesar, because of course he's taking a hard line and showing that anyone who calls himself king will be eliminated. They did become best of friends after this. Okay. But that was the reason, was because he was such a superstitious man. Yes. And again, to see a movie capture all that, they would have to have all that historical knowledge put together. Right. That's why I always look to see who they consulted. Right. Mary Magdalene.
Well, I guess in terms of character, this might have been the most off character that they did, other than the fact that she seemed to be like, I don't know, I guess someone you might meet in a hyper-Pentecostal church, you know, who seemed to have left, you know, sort of left her brain at the door and came in, you know, and it was just all emotion, all... and that's problematic, of course, you know. But the second part of it is... And I think this might have been the biggest blunder, or second biggest blunder in the movie, was that they're looking for Mary Magdalene to find the body. So they say, so it's almost humorous if it wasn't so wrong. But the group of, you know, he goes to a group of Roman soldiers and said, "Who knows Mary Magdalene?" About 10 hands go up, with the implication that they'd all slept with her, you know, and there's a long history between, was Mary Magdalene a prostitute or was she not a prostitute? Which is one discussion, but the worst blunder is that when Christ is resurrected from the dead, you don't go looking for Mary Magdalene in a brothel. And that's exactly what they did in the movie. You know, she would have been transformed. She had... What we do know from the Bible is that she had 7 demons cast out of her. So she was a changed woman.
Remember, we dealt with that issue. It was Pope Leo who messed up, and of course O'Reilly in his book Healing Jesus carried that blunder. So it's we're going to keep dealing with it, because he associated Mary with the prostitute. Right. And that's actually an error, and the Catholics know it's an error that came in from Pope Leo.
And they've actually corrected the error in the 20th century, or like within the last 25 years.
They've admitted it now that
they've admitted it was wrong, but it was one of the first popes. I call him the founder of the popes in the 6th century.
Yeah, somewhere in there, we're gonna take a small break, and we'll be right back after this little commercial. Welcome back to Faith and Reason. You saw there a clipping for Fort Lake Gospel, and certainly we encourage you, if you're in the area, just to go and worship in that church, wonderful church. You're also welcome to come and worship with us. We're at First Baptist. We're at 777 Anderson Avenue in Cliffside Park. And Sunday service is 10 a.m. we have Sunday school, although right now we're not going to have Sunday school for a while. But 11 a.m. we have our regular worship service. Wednesday night we have a Bible study at 7:30 p.m. And we have been putting all the stuff that we have on YouTube, and also you can go to Facebook and look us up. And obviously, firstbaptistcp.org is our website. You can check things out as well. And hopefully soon we'll put Faith and Reason is there. Good, yeah. After the show, we're going to see if we put it up there as well. We've been dealing with the movie Risen, and just looking at different elements of this movie. And we've been looking at different characters. And just going back briefly to Mary Magdalene, because you're right, one of the things that was horrible was not only brothel, but also it made her look like, again, it was a very hippie movement. Bartholomew was the same way.
Yeah.
Oh man, if you only knew. I mean, they're looking up into the
yeah.
sun. If you only knew how it was, you would not be asking. It's like, really, dude, this is really bad. It's like,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was one element that really, really bugged me. Other characters, obviously, I do want to I realize you brought up this Roman soldier, I want to see that one. But Barabbas first.
Barabbas has an interesting portrayal in the movie, and in a nutshell, he actually gets killed before Jesus does, even though he's released for Jesus. So they portray early in the movie, Clavius is taking a group of soldiers to fight, some rebels in the hills, and it seems like as soon as Barabbas is released, he goes and finds some unsavory characters, and they start trying to battle the Jewish soldiers, which is a foolish endeavor, and a number of them die, and it establishes the main character Clavius as a war hero, as a leader, as a brave man in battle. But it also leads to Barabbas being killed, and so which is interesting. I think we have limited historical information on Barabbas, but there's a long tradition of ideas around him.
Yeah.
Even so much so, Hollywood did a 1961 movie on Barabbas, and sort of him being haunted by the idea of Jesus dying in his place.
That was Anthony Quinn, right?
Anthony Quinn, right?
Yeah,
right.
great movie.
Yeah, and so again, that's the old Hollywood, and so again, in this movie, Barabbas is being killed, and Jesus is still on the cross.
Yeah.
And he hasn't even died yet.
Yeah, that was actually, I thought, right at the beginning of the film, I thought, wow, they're definitely trying to draw in men into the movie.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Oh, there's going to be violence, there's going to be action here. It's not going to be all cake and coffee. It's going to be great. It's going to be some blood, but then it just simmered down at that.
Yeah, there was.
One portrayal that I did like, and I told you it was very impressive, was the Roman soldiers, that one Roman soldier. Because you always think, how do you react if you're not a believer and you're a Roman soldier and you're there guarding the tomb? How do you react to the resurrection? And this man just couldn't put his head around it. And here he is being paid off to lie. So he's drowning himself in liquor, trying to convince himself that and so even when Clavius says, oh, maybe your liquor was tainted, he was like, yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe that, but the emotional portrayal, I thought, was, again, for such a side character,
right,
who hardly has anything to say, for that one scene, I thought was incredibly powerful.
Right. And to fill that out it shows only 2 Roman soldiers at the tomb on the night of the resurrection, which is probably an underrepresentation, although the Bible doesn't give a number, but the idea, Romans would be unlikely to just send 2. And then one brings some alcohol to make the night go better.
Yeah.
And so you've got 2 drunk soldiers that are there when the tomb is open. So,
yeah.
Which arguably you say that kind of weakens the argument for the Christian position that an angel came and removed the stone and all of that, and so it does. Certainly the Bible talks nothing about drunken Roman soldiers at the tomb.
Which of course will be. I mean, honestly, that if you abandon your post, if you were drunk, it's automatically death penalty.
Yeah.
And although the Jews would want to pay them off, if these men were so delinquent, Rome would have had them eliminated anyhow.
Yeah.
Just for the embarrassment of the Roman soldiers. But that was one of the things that come up in the things that are historically off. Yeah. Although the Roman soldiers, again, I think maybe in the movie they're trying to capture both. They're trying to give the whole possibility of those who are skeptical about the resurrection. But in his talk about the resurrection, he talks about this great light. And the bursting of the ropes, and and even Clavius says, the stone, the way it was rolled away, there's no way that look how many men it took for us to put down that stone. There's no way these disciples could just have pushed it off and then tossed it across somewhere else.
Right.
So they try. I think they're trying to blame both of them.
Yeah.
But that leads us to the question: what were the things in the movie that were historically off?
One that stands out, and I'm sure you have others too, but one that stands out is the portrayal of the relationship between the Jews and the Romans. It's almost like, you couldn't hardly tell the difference except for the outfits. Like the soldiers wore one set of outfits and the Jews wore, different clothing. But when you think about it, they would have actually spoken two different languages. Now, this is a movie just to make simple. Everything's in English.
Yeah.
There's no, they didn't mess with the language issues. But the Jews would have been speaking Aramaic to one another, and that would have been their language of conversing. And the Romans would have been speaking likely Greek and maybe even, some pre-Italian Roman dialect, but it's so you do have two very different cultures that don't really interact that much with each other.
It made the Romans kind of look a bit schizophrenic.
Yeah.
Because remember when he's going, when the one soldier's going to the tomb and Josephus Joseph of Arimathea is coming down, he just pushes him out of the way. But remember when the one criminal is dying and they've broken his legs, he's like, just let go.
Let go. Yeah.
Go into light, go into light.
Yeah.
And he's being so sympathetic towards him.
Yeah, right.
Romans would not have been sympathetic at all to a Jew or any bandit being killed on the cross. On the contrary, they probably would be laughing and drinking and having a grand old time there, playing dice, which is what they were doing.
Right.
This is normal. They would not have been concerned about whether your mother is here, your cousin, or
No.
God himself. We're going to do, this is, and there was, again, Martin Hengel wrote a great little book called Crucifixion. I recommend it. Everybody should read that book. And he shows it was so atrocious that even Cicero said this is so unbecoming of Romans to do this, because it was so disgusting what a crucifixion was all about.
Yeah.
There was nothing pretty about it.
Yeah.
So, and they would not have cared. But again, torture was an art form for them.
Right.
Other historical inconsistencies that stand out to you?
Well, I mean,
remember, we only have 15 minutes.
Yeah, I know, or less. Yeah, that's right. I guess it just, in a nutshell, what they're doing is they're Americanizing the characters a lot. They're doing a lot of that, and I get it. It's for a Western market, and they're not looking to, try to capture an authentic Middle East. In one sense, that was one of the beauties of the Passion of the Christ, is that he even used the language of the people at the time and worked really hard at that. But they just they put American values into the characters over and over again on different levels, and then part of it, this is maybe just a little bit me. I thought the writers had a little bit of a rural bias over the urban. It's almost like, the peaceful scenes where there's like nobody around. It's like, you get away from the crazy city, and it's certainly that's not going to be the mentality. For a Jew, Jerusalem was the holy spot, and the Sea of Galilee was like the hills of Kentucky to them, that type of thing. So,
any other elements that stand out, not only historically but biblically, things that you would say are definitely off?
Well, I think the one, this might be the biggest blunder in the movie, might be just the ascension scene is not at the Mount of Olives, which is right beside Jerusalem, but it's at the Sea of Galilee. So you have an ascension. Now it's a little bit tricky when you read all of the accounts of Jesus after the resurrection and before the ascension. He does have a scene at the Sea of Galilee. He is there, and they portray that, and mistakenly they add a miracle into it. He healed a leper, which is not in the account, but that's fine. They want to show Jesus as a healer, and that's not a big deal. He could have healed a leper on that day, but there's no indication that he was around healing other people. He was showing himself to his disciples. But to have a resurrection from that spot rather than back at the Mount of Olives, which is it's a significant point in Christian tradition, is where he was ascended, because he's going to come back to the same place. He's going to return. That's a part of the concept of the return of Christ, which ironically, there's a mosque right on the top of the Mount of Olives today.
but you're right. When they do stuff like that, again, unfortunately, people who are watching or don't know end up believing this stuff, and then they think, oh, that's right after he did the fish thing. He actually healed a leper, and then he ascended. And the ascension doesn't even look like, oh, they saw him. It's just like, it almost look like a nuclear
light,
holocaust type, the
kaboom, yes,
it throws you back, and you have dust in your eyes. Someone, again, did we really see what we saw? And that was one of the things, they weren't even sure sometimes whether
Yeah, and he disappeared anyways. You
Yeah.
know, the post-resurrection, he'd come and go. But now you just had a disappearance with
Yeah.
a bomb. You know,
like a
and
bomb, yeah.
that's the difference.
But
But what about yourself? I mean, what were you? What were you seeing? Anything that we haven't talked about yet?
Oh, there were quite a number of things. I mean, you mentioned the guards. I think that was very important, and obviously they were drunk. But even the multiple seals, I did look up. They have like a multiple seal thing, and that was from the Gospel of Peter, which is non-canonical, never accepted by churches, probably Gnostic. So they added elements like that were not biblical. But I didn't get. I don't know.
It didn't bother you.
I was enjoying the movie so much that I didn't get lost. I don't get lost in those kind of things when. I mean, unless it's like blatant, just so blatantly bad. But I mean, look, when you're doing like a Waldo thing where here's a Roman soldier, where I know in the story there's no Roman soldier.
Yeah, right. Well,
I had to suspend what I know and accept your retelling of it.
Right.
At least it wasn't like Noah. Noah was a scary thing when we saw Noah. I was like, what is this?
Yeah, that's true.
But this one, I thought it was pretty good to do that.
Yeah. No, and you're right. I mean, that was probably just to have a Roman soldier join Jesus and his disciples was kind of problematic as well.
So, do you think again should Christians go out and see this film?
You know, yeah, it's worth it. I mean, again, you know, the big issue is that Jesus rose from the dead, and that's the core of Christian faith. If you can't embrace that, you can't be a Christian. It's like that's foundational. And in this Easter season, at least it got that piece right. It's a fictional story around the resurrection. Because they're not Bible scholars writing it, they got some things a little bit off. But that said, it's an inspirational movie. It's something to capture the imagination of men, you know, who would watch it. It's not just a soft telling. It's got some action to it.
And I think it was at least honest insofar as the portrayal of this encounter with Christ. Because one of the great powerful scenes to me was when Clavius goes to the upper room where the disciples are hiding, and he breaks in, but the last thing he expects to see is in the middle of the people, Jesus.
Jesus right there.
And that just throws him off. And, and they did such a great thing of capturing that, and then like him just being like stunned, like he's falling back almost, like what? Dropping his sword. And then you could tell the beginning of his transformation. I thought it was very good because it deals with questions of faith and the encounter with Christ and how powerful that is and how it transforms your life.
Yes.
We have 1 minute. Any last words?
Well, this is the Easter season. It's certainly our churches offer extra programs in the Easter season. You can find them on our websites, and it's a great time to get reconnected with church if somebody needs to do that. It's there's a lot of stuff in the culture, and Time Magazine's going to run a Jesus cover because they sell better that way, and the Young Messiah is coming out in the next week, which looks a little fishy, but who knows? It might be okay. And come to church. Reread the story of Jesus. Go to the Bible.
Oh, we hope you did enjoy our show, and we hope you enjoyed the movie. And go to church. Seek the truth.
Thank you for watching Faith and Reason. Please join us again next week. We invite you to visit our pastors at one of their churches, Pastor Rick Spence at Fort Lee Gospel Church, or Pastor George Crespo at the First Baptist Church in Cliffside Park. Check out our websites for more information.